to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty podcast with Borg, Betz, and a baller.
Welcome in. It's Wednesday, September 25th here on the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I'm joined by Matthew Betz and Jason Moore.
I'm loving the energy today, Kyle. Did you have an afternoon cup of coffee or something? Because you're jacked up.
I was going, and then at one point I was like, now which podcast is this again? I almost called it the DFS podcast. Yeah, you know, we're in the swing of things. Tuesdays are, when we record here, are chock full of stuff we're trying to digest. Like, I feel like Tuesday is one of those days where you're supposed to get waivers ready for all your other leagues, and yet you're still trying to digest what happened last week. So I'm energized, but I still feel like I don't really fully know where I stand on a lot of these teams and players. So yeah, I'm also still reeling from a Falcons loss.
Yeah. Oh man, that is unfair. You don't want to lose, don't play the Chiefs, huh? Schedule better. I would say this is the week where you're starting to really grasp some things, but you're not closing your fist around it yet. Like I was talking to Brooksy about, because when we're putting our show docs together, we try to have the best data in there. Behind the scenes, I've started to look at schedule adjusted fantasy points against, because this season adjusting for schedule, but I still feel like 3 weeks isn't enough. So we made the decision 4 weeks into the season. Next week, that's where we'll have enough firmed up with, 4 matchups for each team where we could start having concrete-ish evidence.
Concrete-ish.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to change throughout the year, too, so you can't be full concrete. We always say stay water, but I think we'll have the lessons that we need to learn to win most of the, our odds, I think, at the end of next week.
Yeah, on this episode, we will be talking trending or ending. So some of these, specifically, I think, is us adjusting to what the NFL has done this year. There's complaint about there's less scoring, but it's also, there's been some play callers that have taken advantage of the NFL changing. So we'll talk about some of those teams. We'll even talk about some defenses that, a lot of time on this show, we're just talking about offensive players, but are there defenses so far that stand out? We're like, man, you have to approach it differently for fantasy for your start sits and the way that you look at certain matchups. So like even certain cornerbacks, like we talked about, who was it? Mike Evans. It's like, oh, Mike Evans is playing the Broncos. They have Patrick Surtain, and at the end of the day, you can kind of explain away it was a bad week, and you're starting to see these trends with some of these defenses. So we're going to discuss that, trending or ending. We're going to do a weekly rewind, talk about some players that we looked at on film, so it should be good. If you want to follow the boys on X, you can follow Jason at JasonFFL. Betz is at the Fantasy PT. Always putting out injury stuff, at least informing me because I'm still not a doctor. And myself at Kyle_Borg. You also can go to our YouTube if you want to go to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty. If you want to see what Betz looks like in person, he is the younger version of what Jason and I used to look like. So Jason's a little older than me, bearded up. Then it's me, and then Betz is our young one.
Thanks, Kyle. That's nice of you to say.
I'm saying that as you are still in the middle of the night dad stuff. You're living every day as its fullest, but also you're also waking up 5 times a day.
These children are aging me beyond belief. It's happening quick.
Yeah, wait a little while. Wait till they get their learner's permit. I'm so freaking old.
Oh my
gosh. I just
gosh,
got it
old
this
as
last
dirt.
week, and I want to kill myself.
Jason, what's the hardest part right now of just like when they leave, you're like, okay, I have zero control now.
I think when they leave, it'll be like, heck yeah, let's party time. No, I think the hardest part is
the driving part.
The driving and the relationships, the equal difficulties.
Oh, well, my biggest thing is just they want to just play outside all the time, and they don't want to hang out with us as much anymore. That's not a bad problem, but young children, it's just a different season of where we're at. But yes, you can follow us on YouTube. We're going to start this episode off getting into the weekly rewind.
Weekly Rewind.
Every week, we rewind the film and we do a deep dive on a player just to give you a behind-the-scenes kind of look at what really happened in the game. If you're just looking at box scores, you are missing out. So, Betz, I will let you start first. And when you put this player down, I thought about it. I do not have this player in any league, in any Dynasty league, any redraft league, and I feel like so far I'm missing out.
Well, I feel bad for you because some may have called Rashee Rice a league winner back in the summer. Some may have. I don't remember who that was, but maybe the fantasy MVP. But Rashee Rice's usage has been so awesome, but also I want like more as far as his NFL route tree ability. And what I'm talking about is this past week, Kyle and I were actually texting during the game because I usually check in on him when Falcons are playing, especially in primetime. And, you know, it was like, he just kept saying, it's like, they're not stopping anything that Rashee Rice is doing. And everybody knows it's going to be a short area target. That's what Rashee Rice does. All of his stuff is at the line of scrimmage. And just for context, there's only a handful of wide receivers that have a lower ADOT this year. Those guys are Wan'Dale Robinson, Khalil Shakir, and Lil Jordan Humphrey. So he has one of the lowest ADOTs in the league, but it's producing unreal numbers for PPR leagues in fantasy because of his yak ability, because of his target share, because of Pat Mahomes, because of all those things. So it's awesome in terms of the usage for the volume. But when I think about the NFL, and we talk about how things change and they swing on a pendulum all the time, Kyle mentions that. Right now, Rashee Rice's game is built for two high safeties, right? Like, get the ball out quick, let him work underneath. Kelsey's declining. He's ascending in terms of his talent and his role. But I just kind of think about, like, when are we going to see more from Rashee Rice down the field? Ever, unless they change, the defensive schemes. That was one of his knocks. I know, like, a lot of the college tape folks out there had said they didn't know his role and how he could win in that way in the NFL. And he hasn't been asked to do that at all. He saw one target so far this year of 20-plus air yards. He saw 7 total all of last year. So it's kind of more of the same for fantasy. It's been awesome. But I'm excited to see and hopeful that we could see Rashee Rice develop into like a true alpha wide receiver where he's not just doing this stuff, which is awesome, but also the other stuff down the field too.
Do you think we're going to see that? Do you think he will develop into that like this season? You think he'll become a more complete guy, or it's just going to be more of the same?
I think it's going to be more of the same for this year. And I don't know what the future holds next year, but we talked all offseason, right, about like the Chiefs. They've done this for 2 years in a row. Like they said, enough is enough. Let's get this vertical element of our game back. Let's bring Hollywood Brown in. Of course, the injury changed that, but let's bring Hollywood Brown in. Let's draft the fastest wide receiver in NFL Combine history. Let's get that in the game. And it hasn't really changed. Pat Mahomes' ADOT is one of the lowest in the league. Again, teams are kind of forcing him to dink and dunk. And so I think as long as that happens, Rice is going to keep doing what he's doing, which again is good for fantasy. But like at some point, NFL defenses are probably going to figure this out.
What's interesting about Rice, Jason, you were the one that was highest, I remember, of the group coming in. And you saw the production. I didn't know how it would translate in the NFL. He finds the perfect landing spot.
You're saying in the draft season?
In the draft season 2 years ago, I was just like, I don't know about this prospect. They take him in the second round. And yet, like, the way they're using him is incredible. I'm trying to compare his skill set because he is this rocked up 6'1" dude who yards after the catch is his thing. He leads the entire league in forced missed tackles. And yet, he's not winning down the field. He's not Debo. I feel like the best comp for me is he's less acrobatic DeAndre Hopkins, where he just gets open constantly in space, but they're just not using him down the field. So that would be kind of be the next evolution, is they're game planning to get this guy involved in more intermediate and down the field. I mean, I believe Mahomes has 2 completions of more than 20-plus air yards.
Correct.
So it's like that's just over time that will change. But yeah, it was frustrating as a Falcons fan. Like, we know what the play is going to be. He's going to get the yard, within 5 yards line of scrimmage, and they didn't change anything. But I mean, Rashee Rice in Dynasty, is he a top 12 wide receiver?
Yeah, I think so. You've got a clear number one target for Patrick Mahomes. And while I think there should be more being said about Patrick Mahomes not really playing great football right now, like, I know he's getting wins and it's good enough with the system and everything for NFL purposes. Part of this is a little bit of a fantasy football complaint, but I think it's more than that. I actually think he has not looked like he looked 2 years ago. He looks gun-shy and hesitant, and maybe that's all the play calling. I don't think it is. But even still, you know that at the end of every game they're going to be in it or winning it, and the number one target for the team that is putting up points is Rashee Rice. They've figured out how to unlock his skill set. So he's a top 12 for Dynasty for sure.
I would agree with that.
Okay, I'll put it to the test then. Would you rather have Puka or Rashee Rice in Dynasty?
Oh, man, that is to the test.
Because before the season, it was no question. We were all taking Puka.
Before the season, it was definitely Puka. I don't think enough credit is given to immediacy in Dynasty. Like, there's only the long term. And, I mean, they're the same age. Puka is missing this season. I would flip it now. I would say I would rather have Rashee Rice. If Puka comes back, if he's not back for another 6 weeks, I mean, that means that it is such an incredible slam dunk for 2024 to have Rashee Rice over Puka that the amount he would need to make up in future seasons to be worth it, the math just says take Rice if you were somehow having a draft today.
And what's funny about that,
all right,
the same thing too, you mentioned like the short-term outlook sometimes gets lost. It's funny when we talk next summer, there's going to be a short-term conversation of how many games is Rashee Rice out, because this ascension got kicked to next year. So not that matters a ton, but it is a consideration. But yeah, that's so interesting on those two guys. I think I would lean Rice, but if you're not a contender this year, go get Puka. I still believe in the talent.
Can I give you another name just to mess with you guys?
Let's do it.
That's my job.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Garrett Wilson or Rashee Rice?
I love this one.
Rashee Rice for me.
I love this one. It's an easy Rashee Rice for me.
It is for me too, but I know that we've kind of talked down about Wilson. And Jason, you brought it up on Monday. It's like, how much longer are we going to keep giving excuses here?
Yeah, I mean, I think Garrett Wilson is a very good NFL wide receiver. A very good NFL wide receiver. I do not believe that Garrett Wilson is an elite NFL wide receiver. One of those top 5 type of players. A Justin Jefferson. That's why he was drafted. Like, make no mistake, the last 2 years you have drafted Garrett Wilson to be the breakout sensational superstar, to be this year's CeeDee Lamb who breaks out and is that dude, to be Justin Jefferson. That's why Garrett Wilson's been going so high. That's the talent level a lot of people believed in him. We've had enough games on the field now, and we've made so many excuses. He's a very good wide receiver. He is not the elite of the elite top 5 NFL wide receiver, and neither is Rashee Rice. But if I'm then in a dynasty and I'm looking at 2 young, talented, very good wide receivers, give me the one who is paired with Patrick Mahomes for the long term versus the one paired with 40s Aaron Rodgers. That's the easy tiebreaker for me.
They are 3 months apart in age. So Rice is just a little bit older. It doesn't feel that way, but they're right there together. So I just throw out age, and I agree with you, Jason. Looking at situation and actual production on the NFL field. So, Jason, you have another wide receiver on here, a guy we talked up this summer as a buy candidate, someone we really liked, and it hasn't been the breakout, but I feel like behind the scenes it's still been good.
Yeah, so you guys might have talked him up. I talked him down a little bit this offseason. I was not bullish. I know on the main show, Mike and Andy were super bullish on this guy, and I was not. And they'd bring up all this data. I'm like, it makes sense. He should be. But for some reason, I can't get behind George Pickens. I just can't see the path. And ironically, through 3 poor fantasy football weeks for George Pickens, I totally see the path now. I completely get it because watching the film behind the scenes, he has looked utterly dominant. You look at last week, 3.9 fantasy points in half PPR, 2 for 29. It's like, how can you say that's utterly dominant? Well, he was playing against Patrick Surtain, and he had a bomb touchdown, or not a touchdown, just a very deep play where he flat out beat Surtain, came back on a holding that didn't affect the play. He had another touchdown that came back on an offensive pass interference by Van Jefferson. That he, on film, on the field, has just been dominating guys. Now, this last week, it was a little bit more of a down game. Still had 7 targets, caught 5 of them for 57 yards. Not great. You're not thrilled about that, but it wasn't like it wasn't like he goosed or anything. And the context of that game, this was a Steelers-Chargers game where this was who can throw the ball fewer times? Which team can run the ball more and score fewer points in a victory? Like that was we knew going into that game. I was talking, my love for Ladd McConkey, and I'm like, you can't play him in a game like this because they're not going to throw the ball. And that's what happened in this game. It was 20-10 victory. So that's not going to be the type where you need George Pickens. But the film breaking down things further for a young guy who is the clear number one for his team and the way they've been using him, I see him dragging right across in front of the defensive line for an easy gimme. I see him going down the sideline for a 9 route, just like super high value over the middle of the field. They're using him everywhere.
Yes.
And I think that there are brighter days ahead. You had week 1, he was pretty good. I thought it was really good. He was 6 for 85 in week 1. Week 2 was Patrick Surtain. Week 3 was what I just described. Now going forward, you've got a couple of games in here, 3 of the next 5. You've got Indy this week. You've got the Raiders 2 weeks after that. You got the Giants 2 weeks after that. I think you're going to have, by the end of this year, you're going to look back and be like, yeah, George Pickens is a clear number 1 alpha for his team. And probably a top 15-ish wide receiver, and he's not dealt with like that at all. So we have a trade for target on the main episode. He's one of my trade for targets.
Nice, yeah. The diversity in his usage, I think, is my biggest takeaway from this past summer to now. It's like this guy can be a complete wide receiver. He's not going to be always the most polished. You're still going to get some highlight plays that are just great. Like that's what we care about, but the intermediate stuff, the easy layup stuff, like for fantasy, that's what we always needed. He had an end zone target in this game against the Chargers where it was just off, just the timing was just off between him and Fields. So I feel like it's right down the pipe. I think he's just cheaper than some of these other guys that you're going to try to acquire right now.
I will say too, one thing on the Steelers schedule, they have relatively a difficult schedule coming up as far as like actual NFL opponents. Looking at the spread moving forward, they're not going to be favored in a ton of games when you look at their after the bye week schedule, which when you think about the pass rate for the Steelers, they've been able to just kind of, control the ball, run the ball, play good defense. That might not happen every week, and in those game scripts, Pickens I think will shine. So yeah, I like the fact
they're one of the only undefeated teams. They're 3-0 right now,
right.
And last week when they only scored 20 points and won, that was easily their season high. It was 20. They won with 18 points, they won with 13 points, and they won with 20 points. So to your point, if they can't win games without scoring at least 3 touchdowns, they're going to have to sling it more.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, I'm going to bring up the Tampa Bay backfield, something that we've talked up a couple of times. It was in my bold Dynasty predictions that I believe mine was Rachaad White will fall outside of the top 24 Dynasty running backs and that Bucky Irving would make some noise. I didn't think it would be this early because White's still seeing the snaps. And despite seeing, 70+% of the snaps, every game we're walking away, all of us are saying, man, Bucky looks really good. And I mean, is it just me or does Bucky look like he's grown 2 inches and gained 15 pounds?
I have been saying this while we're watching football every single week is like when he's running between the tackles, I don't understand. He looks so much bigger than in college. My biggest knock on him was that he weighed like 100 pounds and was 5 foot even. And then, all of a sudden it's like, no, he just looks like he looks like James Cook or someone that's like not a big back, but he looks totally not out of place on the NFL field, which is surprising. Maybe, these are young guys. Maybe he was still growing.
But Bucky's just still a growing boy. He's averaging 6.2 yards per carry through 3 games. I don't even want to mention what Rachaad White's at. It's that bad. He's 45th out of 49 qualifying running backs in rushing yards over expectation. It's kind of what he did last year. That was like the thing the whole time is like, he can't keep getting away with this. His inefficiency, his, fantasy points per touch were all below league average. And you're kind of seeing Bucky behind the same O-line, just reading defenses better. Like that's been my takeaway. I liked it in college is that despite being a smaller dude, he can run between the tackles. And the only way I can describe it is we've all thought that Devin Singletary is a good NFL running back. Like he's good. He's good at his job. He can read defenses. He can make one cut and go. He's not big, but he's a capable NFL running back who got a second contract. And I think that's kind of where Bucky is. They've used him on end arounds. This past week, there was like a counter, this kind of misdirection where they had both running backs on the field, and then it was just Bucky who went for 30. And I did see this, that Rachaad White has 432 carries in his career. Okay, so he's touched the ball a lot. Bucky Irving already has as many runs over 30 yards in his career as Rachaad White.
Wow, that's crazy. I mean, Rachaad White, I believe this year, he's over 30 carries and he's under 70 total yards. It's a bad play to hand the ball to him. Like, it's just, I mean, at some point, the Buccaneers are going to say, hey, every time that we hand the ball to Rachaad White, our drive stalls, our drive gets hurt. And they don't want to not run the ball. They were fine handing it to Rachaad White last year over and over and over with inefficiencies. But if they have an alternative option, like you said, it's the same offensive line. It might be a vision problem because it's not an athleticism problem. Rachaad White isn't a plodding, slow back. He's very efficient in the receiving game, not just in catch percentage, but in yards per reception. Last year, he was fine. I just don't know that he's a very good running back, and Bucky is clearly better at that part of the game. So you've started to see this last week. You started to see both of them on the field for a handful of snaps where it's like, I think it's just smart. The defense doesn't know which running back's going to get it. If you're handing the ball off, there was a couple plays where they used misdirection, gave it to Bucky, and it just great, even helps open things up for him.
For sure. I think it's one of those things that if you took Bucky in a rookie draft, he slipped to like the third round because it was just like the draft capital wasn't there. There's a bunch of running backs in the fourth round we didn't really know what to do with. Now we're looking at it, it's like Bucky, Braylon Allen. It's like these guys can play. They belong in the NFL. We saw that in college, and they kind of dropped here. But the running back rooms that we've kind of poked at the most, and I know that you've talked about this a lot too, Betz, it's Tampa Bay, where like running the ball is just usually a bad play with Rachaad White. It's Denver, like every time they hand the ball off. And then it's your favorite player in the league, DeAndre Swift with the Bears. Anytime those teams run the ball, it's bad.
Bad things happen, man. Yeah, and I don't know how much of that is attributed to O-line play, plus how much is it running back talent or just a combination of that plus scheme, but it's a lot of things. But either way, like those three is specifically, White, Swift, and Javonte Williams. It's like Jason said, it's a losing NFL teams, losing strategy to give those guys the ball right now in the run game. It's just not working. And last year with Tampa specifically, one thing about them that made them such a good offense was they were so efficient on third down and like lights out efficient on third down. But they were getting themselves in trouble on, second and long, third and long because of some of the running issues. And now you kind of have this balance where it's like they don't want to get behind the sticks. That's going to regress the third down efficiency. So you're already seeing the coaching staff come out and say like, yeah, Bucky's earned more touches. So yeah, we'll see. The vibes on those three guys specifically literally could not be worse in fantasy right now.
The conversation we had too was the third-year running back this year. Pacheco, James Cook, Kyron Williams, Rachaad White, all of the guys that came through for the most part last year. It was figuring out where did they stand this year and then going into a contract year where you set up really well. And so White was one of those guys that we identified as like, man, it's just a lot that has to go right for him. He can stay on the field, but at the end of the day, it's like there's just no efficiency here other than if he sees 5 receptions, sweet. He's going to still be valuable. You can start him as an RB2, but I feel like the ceiling outcome, like he had the best fantasy season of his career last year. I mean, I feel super confident saying that. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. We are 3 weeks into the season, and at this point, I feel like we can start spotting some trends. Like Jason mentioned, there's some defenses that we can start to look like, okay, this is a run funnel, or this is a pass funnel, or, I'm going to exploit this. So these are some of the trends. Let's sort out some more, because last year on this show, guys, the topic we brought up on trending or ending for Dynasty was, is Nico Collins for real? 3 weeks in.
Hope we said yes.
I think we said he's good. We also said there's some inefficient running backs, which feels like the dudes we just brought up. Najee, Josh Jacobs, 3 weeks into the season, we were like, I don't know if this is going to work out. Alexander Madison. And then we had a really interesting conversation. I went back and even listened, where 3 weeks into the season, CeeDee Lamb was balling out. And yet in Dynasty, he was kind of seen as like wide receiver 6, 7 at the time. And we just said, what if this dude is just in the top 3? Like, what if he's at the time Jefferson or Chase? And it was interesting because you kind of needed to make that move then If you would have waited a whole season for CeeDee Lamb, you're not getting it.
Yeah, you can't get him now.
So it's kind of spotting and trying to be ahead of the curve. You mentioned it, Jason. In Dynasty, I want to take little small sample sizes sometimes and act on them as opposed to just always going, you know what? I'm going to be passive and see what happens, by week 10. And then by then, nobody wants to trade with you. So let's get into it.
Trending or ending.
So if you played fantasy football for years, one of the things that we have cared about the most is finding bell cow running backs. And I found some statistics, and what I want to do is have a conversation of, has football changed a little bit this year? Do we have to approach Dynasty a little different? Because the elite running backs are crushing right now. If you have one or two of them, you are just destroying your opponents who said, I can get by with Jerome Ford. Or, you know what, Jalen Warren's going to come through for me.
It's been a bad year for zero RB right now, which is super ironic considering this was the highest wide receiver drafted season ever. So that's kind of the two things colliding to make it so far an unfruitful zero RB season.
So I'm going to give you guys a list because what I did is I looked at every running back in the NFL and the percentage of team plays that they got a touch. So this team ran an offensive play. Did they get a touch? This year we have 24 running backs. Okay. So that's 75% of the league that are seeing a touch on a quarter of their team's plays. So 25% of the plays or more, they are seeing a touch. That's the highest it's been over the last couple of years. It's been 20, 18, 21. We have 24 running backs so far that have hit this list. And I feel like we're actually feeling it more. There's even dudes that didn't make this list, like Jahmyr Gibbs. He's right under it, 24%. Isaiah Pacheco would be above this list if he was healthy. Joe Mixon would be above on this list if he were also healthy. So we really have 80% of the league that is adopting one dude seeing a touch on 25% of their plays, where we've kind of seen the pendulum of, they're moving towards committee backs. That's how it works. So far this year in the NFL, they are just letting people, just get an insane amount of usage. Alvin Kamara, 41% of the Saints plays, he's touched the ball. That's just a crazy, crazy statistic. Jonathan Taylor's at 36. Bijan's at 36%. Breece Hall. But then you're seeing some other names on here. Josh Jacobs at 35%. Najee Harris, despite how inefficient, is getting the ball on 33% of their offensive plays. So what I want to ask you guys is, are you feeling this in your Dynasty League based on just your matchups and who you're playing? And are you adjusting your perspective of how you are trying to trade for running backs? Because that's really what we're trying to do at this point, is look at the trends and then figure out, is it going to stay this way for NFL offenses? Because it's really run heavy. And then find out some trade for candidates.
I think it'll stay this way this season, being a little bit more run heavy than pass heavy. The NFL is always a moving target, and the arrow, it's as things become more pass happy in the NFL, whether it's the rules or the players or the systems and the schemes, defenses adjust, and that's where we've seen these quarter coverages and these two high safeties and all these things and now teams are like, okay, well, if you're going to give us that coverage, we need to run the ball more, which is probably the right thing to do. And so I do think it'll stick. Now, I am of the belief, I have started looking at the data and seeing how unbelievably down scoring is, how much more advantaged defenses are than offenses right now when you look at pass rush versus offensive line. I really, really think that the offense will figure it out and get better as the season goes along. So if we're just talking about right now versus the rest of the season, no, I don't think it's going to stay as drastic as it is. I do think it'll be more running back heavy than the previous couple years, but there's no preseason anymore, and it does feel like we're playing preseason football. So, a month in, these offenses are going to figure it out, and I think we're going to be better off. And obviously when the offenses start figuring it out, that means passing. Passing is more efficient than running, always. It will forever be, even with the two high safeties, a la what Kansas City's doing. It might not be deep passing, It might be just finding a way to hit a guy on a screen, but that's going to probably pick up more yards than handing the ball off. So as far as my belief, whether it continues or not, yes, it continues more than last year. No, it does not continue as it has through the first 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think too, just on top of that, thinking about where we are in the season, like it kind of feels like we've seen a ton so far in terms of just like how much football we've watched and how many games have been played. We're still only 3 weeks into the regular season. Like it's still the beginning. Not that we don't want to act on what we've seen, but it's still a very small sample size, and we do have a larger sample size in terms of how many true bell cow backs there are in the NFL historically in the last few years has gone down year over year over year. This year, it just seems like it completely flipped, went the other direction. Now we have bell cows everywhere. But I look at some of these guys on the list, and there's a bunch of guys that are kind of hanging on at the end of their dynasty life cycle. Like, Najee's future is in question. Aaron Jones is a veteran back. Derrick Henry's on his last contract, most likely. James Conner's in a contract year. There's like a bunch of guys on the list that you're like this is great right now, but I don't know how to feel about them later this year or beyond this year, which makes some really interesting dynasty conversations because, again, you need some of these guys to win right now, obviously, but you don't want to like overpay and then set yourself back for next year and beyond. So it's a very delicate balance, and I think Kyle's hopeful with this section we can find a couple names to trade for that won't cost you an arm and a leg.
There's so many players that Dynasty 101 is they're old. I should trade them away. And yet you need them on your roster. For instance, Aaron Jones has been awesome. Still awesome on a per touch basis and still good his entire career when it comes to efficiency. It's just who he is. And yet he's on a team that we've kind of seen over the past with Kevin O'Connell. They just didn't like to run the ball, and we didn't expect them to be 3-0. So it's like Aaron Jones is a dude, he's averaging 6 yards per touch. It's better than Kamara, better than Jonathan Taylor. He's been awesome. That it's like, I shouldn't trade for him. I should not do it. Everything tells me I shouldn't. And yet, he's a running back on an offense that's humming, and things are working out really well, and it's clear that he's the dude. So he's one of those guys that I just was like, age, team, I don't want him in any format this year. And so far, he's been good.
Yeah, he's been very, very good, which is why...
I don't know what to do.
Oh, that's an easy answer. You trade him away. There's a couple of guys on this list that,
he's been good,
that I think are... that are obvious tradeaways. Like, you're not going to at the end of this season. I don't think going into next year you're gonna capture much for Aaron Jones. Nobody really wanted him coming into this season, but now you're seeing, wow, he's really valuable. He's been very efficient. The Vikings offense has been really, really surprising, and so you can get. There are teams with a window that are in their championship window that will pay because they need a running back. And I think that's where I would capitalize if I have Aaron Jones, because if you don't get something for him now, and it's kind of like we always try to do. You try to trade him for a younger prospect plus something, plus a pick or something like that, or we've talked about this as well. Trade old for old. Okay, if you're a little bit worried, you need another running back. You might not be able to just trade him for a haul of picks and you still want a running back, but I'm sure you could trade, you could probably trade, Aaron Jones. Tell me, would you do this? Like, trade Aaron Jones for Raheem Mostert and a 1? You're getting a first rounder for Aaron Jones, which at the beginning of the year, you probably would have been like, oh my gosh, I would do anything for it. Now, obviously Mostert's hurt right now. You're going to take a week or two hit, but he didn't go on IR. I expect him to be back soon. They're going to need to run the ball here without Tua, and then the offense gets better when Tua comes back. So, that it's something like that. That might not be the trade, but I do think you should capitalize on this 3-week venture. In fact, he's a guy I think even in redraft, not even in Dynasty, there's a lot of value to gain right now. And while I am very surprised pleasantly and excited about the Vikings team, it's really hard for me to imagine that 17 weeks of this roster with Sam Darnold will hold up. And it's just like, what could go wrong? 3 weeks in, we feel like we know everything. And at the end of the year, we can look back and be like, remember when we thought at week 3 that the Vikings were like fully legit and they were going to, be a contender? I don't know.
You heard it here, folks. Vikings are going to fall off a cliff, according to Jason. No, I think it's a good point, too, when you look at their roster and personnel. Just zooming in on Jones for a second. Like, to me, the reason he's getting so much usage, Jordan Addison's been out with the high ankle sprain. TJ Hawkinson's still coming back from the ACL. When those guys come back, is he still used as much in the passing game? I'm not sure. I mean, he's always been a great pass catching back, but obviously you prefer to use those weapons, I think, first over Jones. So, I think context there is important. And just like any player in any situation, context is important. But that specifically, to me, I do see a scenario where Jones probably falls off in terms of his workload. I mean, seeing a touch on 33% of their plays right now for a back at this part of his career is kind of unheard of. So, especially Jones, who's never really been a true bell cow, this is an outlier for his career.
I wanted to bring up the Lions running backs because Montgomery is at 28% and Gibbs is at 24%. So 52% of the Lions plays this year, one of their running backs has touched the ball, which is a pretty crazy rate if you think about it. And they've basically been split. Their red zone work, their fantasy production, it's like these guys have both been good. Not great, but both good every single week. And Dave Montgomery is one of those players, too, in that category of he's older, you should probably trade him. I traded him in a league a couple of weeks ago before the season, and I got a first and a second for Dave Montgomery. And I think it would cost you at least that right now to get him. I looked back when I acquired him, I paid a year ago a first and a second. So it's kind of like his value is contingent on him staying healthy and him continuing to see this, high-end RB2 type workload. But do you feel like that's kind of the price you have to pay? You have to play maybe a first, you said first plus Mostert. Is that kind of what you have to do? A first plus a little bit more to move some of these players?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to take an L on this season. You're not just trading for the future. You're not just being like, hey, I always want to stay good and never great. You want to win championships at some point, but the assets you just want to find. Basically, you're trying to. It's simple economics, where it's like you want to sell when it's high and buy when it's low, and that's not even to say that you don't use your first and turn around and find a better asset to add to your team this season. I know Andy Holloway does this all the time. He'll, it's like in our league of record, which is a keeper format, we trade future picks, and a lot of times basically teams are acquiring picks because they're selling off and playing for the future, or they're doing the reverse and selling their picks and grabbing guys. If he has an opportunity to just get more value than what the probable future will take in the form of picks, he will acquire those picks, and then he'll turn around and try to use those picks to acquire more players when the value is lopsided. So you're just looking for something that appears to have a little bit of a House of Cards feel to it.
I do have some update information. There is a company called Eponomics that does DNA research, but they haven't tweeted in 5 years. So
they're really busy doing that work. I mean,
DNA
is not easy work. They're startup, so they've finished. They've shut down. Their startup shut down.
They're not going to be a sponsor.
There's another player. We've got you've got a list of all these workhorse guys, the guys getting a ton of use, and we're talking about whether you would keep them, trade for them, trade them away, whatever. There is one player on this list that, man, there's just, I don't know how it goes wrong. It shouldn't. But you just know it's going to, and I don't want it to at all. I'm totally rooting. He's only 25 years old, a running back only 25, who is, I think, like, if the thresholds are high enough, maybe the best yards per carry running back of all time in J.K. Dobbins, who's back, who's healthy, on a run-first team, attached to a good coach and a good quarterback. Like, he's 25 years old. This should be a dynasty diamond in the rough. Like, you went from someone who you thought was just gone, no career, no future, to maybe he plays the next 5 years as a really, really good running back. And so, Betz, I wanted to ask you about this because his issue has been injury. They are utilizing him a lot. I remember back in the day, Frank Gore was thought to be this injury risk in the beginning of his career. It was like, he's always injured, blah, blah, blah. and then he became like an Iron Man. And we've referenced that on the show a bit. But I went back and I looked, and it's like, okay, when he's always injured, he missed a couple of games. This wasn't like his body broke down. He really wasn't. I think he was unfairly labeled like that. Keenan Allen is another one of those players. Dealt with injuries a lot in the first couple of years, and then all of a sudden didn't for a long stretch of time. But we've had so many years of J.K. Dobbins getting injured. What do we do with him, man? Is his body going to allow him to play NFL running back at volume for several more years? We need that answer, because that answer tells everything. This is either an awesome dynasty buy low, or right now is the buy high, and it's all, I feel like, it's injury. It's not talent, it's not situation, it's not opportunity. It's just, Betz, look under your x-ray and tell us, can his body do this?
I would love to have a definitive answer on this, and I'm going to try to give us one. Because when you look at Dobbins, right, like, it's not just he's had some injuries here and there and it hasn't worked out. They're like major injuries, right? Like the ACL plus the LCL, then the setback, then the second surgery on top of that to address scar tissue and stiffness in the knee, then a torn Achilles less than a year later. Like, it's been a really long 3 years for J.K. Dobbins. And I agree, it's not a question of his talent. He's highly drafted, was very good at Ohio State, great prospect, and he's been successful on the field. But he's already this year, through 3 games, setting a career high in snap rate. And it's only been 55% of the snaps. So that tells you a lot about kind of like how he's utilized and how he's played in his career with these injuries. So to me, when I look at a player like this, he's gotten off to a great start. Was the RB4 in back-to-back weeks, Las Vegas and Carolina. Fell off a little bit against Pittsburgh, predictably there. But to me, when I look at Dobbins, he's probably a guy that makes sense to move on from because of what you can get for him right now. Whereas 4 weeks ago, he didn't really have any value. Like, look at redraft leagues where he was going, right? Like, in best ball, he was going in like the 14th round for the entire summer because no one thought this could happen. And now you have a short-term window where all of a sudden people are very willing to flip their priors on a situation that's likely, anything in fantasy football is probably probability-based, right? It's unlikely that this sustains for an entire year and an entire career. So for me, if I can recoup major value on a player like this, I'm willing to do it. Now, you could say you look back and you're wrong, but again, you just look at probability-based type stuff. Usually running backs in year one off the Achilles are a bad losing bet in the first season. So I think it's a somewhat savvy move to move on from him if you can get appropriate value for him right now.
I traded for him in a league, a team that's in a championship window. It was I got Dobbins and a second-round pick in a superflex for Bo Nix. And I think at the end of and Bo Nix was like my QB3 or QB4. So I wasn't counting on Nix, and I'm in a window where I have all my running backs are hurt. And so for me, it was, if I get anything more than this year, that's the cherry on top. But I think he's one of those players that if you need something now, the offense is going to keep running through him. He could break, I get it. But you're getting high-end production on a team that Greg Roman thinks about J.K. Dobbins when he goes to sleep at night. That's the kind of stuff this guy's into. So I think I'm okay knowing that it's probably a loss long-term for sure in that kind of trade. But for my roster, it was, hey, I'm willing to jump in and get an RB2. So we do have some more topics that I want to get to, but we're going to take a quick break. All right, we're back. We're going to hit another trending or ending topic. This one's about defense, because year to year, defense is probably more volatile than what you think. And so this one's going to be more of a, based on what you guys feel so far, are you adjusting in your expectations of, for instance, the Cowboys are terrible so far against the run. Most rushing touchdowns allowed over the last decade through 3 games. The Ravens have been a pass funnel so far, the most passing yards per game allowed. After last year, they were so great. And then even the Chiefs, a team that last year we said this defense is elite. Last year, 6th fewest yards per game allowed. This year, the 6th most. So in terms of y'all's fantasy understanding of just like, okay, for instance, when I look at Washington, this is a perfect setup for fantasy because the defense is so bad that it's pushing the offense, and it's going to stay that way. It's going to stay in. The defense is so bad that Daniels and everybody else is going to have to keep playing catch up. Is there any other teams so far that you're seeing how their defense is playing and it's actually affecting the offensive weapons? It's actually affecting how you view those games. So for instance, Chicago, their defense looks awesome so far. And apart from Caleb getting to throw the ball, 50 times against the Colts, it's going to keep probably getting them in games that they don't really have to do a ton to stay in them. And it's affecting the way that I look at some of these weapons for this year. So is there any defenses like that for y'all that it's affecting your view?
Yeah, there's a couple that come to mind for me. The switch at quarterback for the Carolina Panthers has allowed a terrible defense to be played against now. What we saw last year, if you actually look at the data from last year, they were one of the worst matchups for quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends. I mean, every week it was like bench your stud wide receiver. And you're like, what? Against the Panthers? And it's like, yes, they do not need him. They will not use him, and he will score 5 fantasy points because he will be sitting the second half of the game. And so the change to Andy Dalton, we saw it right off the bat. This is like a team that now can catch up, but their defense is trash. So I love that one. And then another one that I thought coming into the year, I mean, they were a really good run D last year. They have assets to get after the quarterback. But goodness gracious, you would talk about a coach who in his third year got exposed once and in his third year is getting exposed twice. Dougie Peterson has the Jaguars looking #bad. So right now, if you adjust for schedule this season, they're 30th against quarterbacks, 28th against running backs, 29th against wide receivers, and fantasy points given up. So, I mean, that's like, okay, I feel like I can start targeting them. That's one. And then back-to-back years of the Detroit Lions, you cannot run on them. You cannot, and they will score points. So that's one to target for wide receiver play, quarterback play.
Yeah, I think the Jaguars are interesting because in theory, if you're like, this defense is terrible, we should have an offense that can fight back and give us these high-scoring games. The problem is I'm not sure Trevor Lawrence is the guy you want in a negative game script. We've seen that not just this year, but last year and the year before. And it's like, man, it's bad. It's really bad in Jacksonville as far as the offense and defense top to bottom. I think a coaching change is probably happening sooner than later if that doesn't get turned around. But one that stuck out to me is Houston. You think about the secondary, and you can throw on them a little bit, but they've been getting after the quarterback like crazy. And their defense has played very, very well. And when I think about CJ Stroud and what we're counting on from Stroud, Tank Dell, Nico, Diggs to some degree, like we want this defense to struggle, but they've been very, very good. And my fear with Stroud and some of these pass catchers is if they're not really pushed because their defense is playing so well, are we going to be disappointed by some of those big names in Houston? And I think you've seen that to some degree. Tank Dell's been a disappointment to start the year. Nico's still been great, but Diggs has kind of been up and down, back and forth. And I think that's kind of what you're going to get with the pass catchers unless the defense regresses. And right now, Houston's defense looks great.
I want to just bring up Buffalo because I was shocked with all their turnover, everything else that's changed. Their defense is awesome. Sean McDermott's been great. And it's also causing these games just to kind of it's almost like they don't have to try. They know they're going to win. They know that they're going to be able to have plays on offense that move things forward, but it's actually stagnating the entire team from just an opportunity standpoint. We've talked a lot about the offense and how they want to run the ball, but just it's going to be so spread out. We saw that on Monday night. Even Dalton Kincaid, who had the touchdown, we're all celebrating for the whole sake of all of the tight ends. And then I looked at it and I was like, he had 16 routes. He had the same number of routes as Dawson Knox. So I wonder if their defense is going to be so good, their offense is going to be so efficient and run the ball that just the overall plays per game are just completely nerfed. I mean, they're 31st in offensive plays per game so far. So it's wild that a team could be this good. Because would you guys say that Buffalo maybe has been the best looking team in the NFL?
They're number one in EPA per play. They've been awesome.
They by far, both sides of the ball, they're looking incredible.
Yeah, even with all their defensive turnover, it's just so I wonder if we're going to get the back and forth. But maybe we get a game like Monday where Josh Allen's like, I'll just throw for 4 ahead of time, and then you don't have to worry about the rest. So their defense, their entire team, Josh Allen. I don't know what the odds are right now, Betz. I haven't looked at him recently for MVP. I'm assuming he's got to be up there.
I think he's the favorite, yeah. I want to say plus 200.
Okay. It's looking really, really good so far. So you guys mentioned a couple of quarterbacks. You mentioned CJ Stroud. I wanted to bring up a trending or ending topic about the AFC South because so far it's kind of been a catastrophe for fantasy if you've looked at the quarterbacks in this division. So in the offseason, we highlighted that this is like the youngest division when it comes to quarterback play, and it was CJ Stroud, who's now 23, Trevor Lawrence, turning 25, and then Anthony Richardson and Will Levis being the oldest quarterback in this division is still just hilarious to think about. But all of these quarterbacks have kind of slipped, at least from production standpoint. Like I think Stroud has stayed steady in dynasty value, but if you took him in a startup as the QB2 or QB3, you can't be happy so far. It's just a 3-week sample size. But we're going to start with Richardson and work our way through this division because it's bad. And it gets worse as you move down to Trevor Lawrence and Levis. So let's talk about Richardson. This summer, he was seen as the quarterback 5, quarterback 6 in startup rankings. I'm using keep trade cut here. And now, based on those vibes alone, people are valuing him at quarterback 11. Is that too steep of a change after 3 weeks, or is that appropriate? Because those ranks aren't set in stone. That's just what people are saying. That's the vibes out there. But do you guys feel like that's appropriate, that he's not a top 6 quarterback in Dynasty?
I think it's very appropriate. You're going to need to make decisions quickly, and sometimes that will be a poor thing. Sometimes you look at Josh Allen and you say, man, I don't think this guy's going to get it together. He's just so inaccurate. I'm going to try to get something for him. He was a high draft pick in the NFL. He's got a cannon. He's a rushing mobile quarterback. He's been okay for fantasy in his, first year and a half. Nothing special. And then, and you exit and you take the gigantic L because they trade for Stephon Diggs and he becomes an accurate quarterback and the best quarterback for fantasy and, over the next forever. But those are real outliers. Sometimes you look at Justin Fields and you say, man, I think he's good for fantasy. He can run, but he doesn't have all the tools. I don't know that he's going to be a starter in this league long term. And last year you made the decision. We talked a lot about Justin Fields last year about would he be a starter in the NFL in 2024? And I think we all concluded, I don't think he's going to start next year. Now, he is a starter, but wasn't supposed to be. Russell Wilson was the pole position. Russell Wilson got hurt, and so he is the backup who has now become the starter. But, that's on the long-term dynasty outlook of Anthony Richardson. On a redraft on a this season basis, I mean, you saw week 1, he was the quarterback 4, went out there and put up, 26 points in 4-point per passing touchdowns. I have him in my league of record. I started him this last week. Even though it was against the Bears, I was worried. I was worried because of what we saw in week 2. Week 1 was what made me play him in week 3. You're going to have to take some lumps sometimes. I think you need to be trying to predict the lumps a little bit better. I could very easily see how that Chicago Bears pass rush and defense could affect him. So, for instance, this week he's playing against the Steelers. Yeah, I see how Mike Tomlin's going to confuse him and how T.J. Watt's going to lay him gingerly on his back. He's going to turn the ball over. So I think he is currently a streaming option who is still a top 12 dynasty asset. But you got to adjust and move down. I think it was asked on today's show, dynasty-wise, who you'd rather have between Anthony Richardson, who was clearly ahead of Jaden Daniels, or Jaden Daniels. And I don't think it's overreacting. I really don't think it's overreacting to say, I believe Jaden Daniels has a career ahead of himself from what we've seen, and I think Anthony Richardson can get it together to have one for his career. And based on those answers, you should be taking the guy that you're confident in.
Yeah, and Daniels, too, just to that specific example, he was a much better passer as a prospect coming out. And we've seen some of that already on the NFL field. Whereas Richardson, it's not just the decision-making, it's the inaccuracy, the missed throws, the missed open throws. When the deep bombs hit, it's pretty sweet, but that doesn't happen super often in today's NFL. So I do think the downgrade is appropriate. To me, I think this is maybe a little bit too much based off of the high upside case of if it does hit in terms of his rushing and that sort of thing. So I guess I'm kind of in the middle. Like QB 11 feels a little aggressive to me, but I do think he should be downgraded based off what we've seen so far. I still trust Shane Steichen to kind of help get this thing figured out. The offensive line is still pretty good. They just got Josh Downs back, who, Kyle will give us a hard time about. I know Jason was not a fan of last year, but is going to help the offense. So, let me see a couple more weeks with him.
Let me put that to the test. Let me give you a couple names here. Obviously, if it was Anthony Richardson or Jordan Love, where are you at?
Dynasty?
I'd take Love.
Yeah, Dynasty.
Jordan Love.
Okay, me as well. What about Jaden Daniels? Are you on that side? Jaden is flipped?
Jaden.
Okay.
I'd take Jaden.
Let's go someone like Dak Prescott.
Ooh.
He's 31 years old, so he's still got probably another 5 years of quality football left. Does not have the quarterback one in his range of outcomes the way that Anthony Richardson does. Anthony Richardson is only 22 years old. Which side?
I slightly lean Richardson just for the upside case, but I wouldn't fault anyone for going with the safer play of Dak.
So is that the same for Joe Burrow then? Joe Burrow's now the age is split between Dak and Anthony Richardson.
That's easy.
Kyle doesn't like Joe Burrow
easy.
at all.
No, I'm just kidding. I'd take
Burrow too.
Okay, so I think he is dropping to because we're going to take Stroud over him, Kyler Lamar.
I would take him over Caleb Williams.
Yeah, that's a great name to bring up for Dynasty. I mean, it's 3 games into a career, and he's already shown some flashes of awesomeness. But he's also shown some stuff that's okay, he's got some work to do to prove that he's going to be good. I think he's going to be good. I still do.
I think he's going to have really good, great moments. I think what is not talked about is that so when you escape the pocket, it is a superpower when it works out. When it doesn't work out, it is a train wreck for an NFL team. It kills drives. It's really hard. And so, in preseason when he throws to Odunze on that awesome throw, which none of us could ever make, very few human beings on the planet can make that throw that Caleb Williams made. It clouds our idea of what he actually is snap to snap and in the pocket. And I whispered to Betz, and maybe this is mean, Jason, you can call me out. Is he just like fancy Jameis?
Oh no.
Is that who he is?
Oh,
No, I don't.
Both taking number 1 overall.
Oh no.
And I don't like their footwork at all.
I get that. I don't like the footwork, but the arm talent I think is significantly better for the footwork can be overcome, I think, by Caleb Williams' arm talent. And I think Caleb Williams will be okay, but it will
just
take
not with Shane Waldron.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. You took it right out of my mouth. It's not going to be while Shane Waldron is there. This reminds me, and I hope this is the case, and it's in the same city. But Michael Jordan comes to the Chicago Bulls, and there's a coach there that's just not good enough. And it wasn't until they replaced the coach that they got Jordan to become Jordan. And Shane Waldron sucks. You are a temporary placeholder in – you've got to get rid of him this offseason. I don't know how the season's going to go. This defense could win a lot of games for them. Maybe at the back half of the year, Caleb starts getting it together, and all of a sudden, the whole, staff is back. I've never been a real Eberflus head coach believer. I'm not like anti-Eberflus. I think he's just, a coach who, congratulations, has the head coaching gig. But Shane Waldron he's an offensive wrecker, and he's not who should be leading Caleb Williams.
One of the worst things possible for a rookie quarterback is a broken run game, a struggling offensive line, and a terrible OC. And the Bears have all three of those things.
3 of
right
the
now.
worst things possible.
They've got all 3 of them. So
one of the worst things possible is these 3 things.
It's also not surprising because of those things that he struggled. So yeah, let's get Phil Jackson in here and we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Jordan figured it out.
Yeah. Yes. You don't think it was Phil Jackson? You just think it was Jordan? But, this is there's a couple of guys out there. There's a couple of names that I think next year it would be real, like Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson bringing his system from the Lions, or he's creative. There's a couple of offensive coordinators out there in the league that they've turned down jobs. They've been like
Slowick.
Yeah, Slowick. Perfect example. One of those two guys is probably going to be the head coach of the Bears next year.
Yeah, I mean, there's Coobs. Let's see what he does this year, and if it stays. Obviously, it wasn't going to stay what it was the first 2 weeks, but he's another name.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Cliff is going to get talked up if they continue to just be what they are. Again, I don't know what Cliff wants to do, to be honest.
Nobody does.
No, Cliff's just like, I'm good at what I'm doing now. So we talked about Richardson. We talked about Caleb Williams because it's just fun. You got to, but I did want to bring up CJ Stroud because so far, how would you say it's felt for fantasy this year?
Bad. I don't think it's felt neutral.
Call it bad?
Yeah.
Okay. Betz?
Not great.
Not great, Bob?
Not great, Bob.
Okay. So the thing about Stroud, and the thing we loved last year, is he could dissect defenses for being such a young quarterback. It's like, what's going on the field. Like, that's what we loved when we compared him to Bryce Young. It's like, Bryce doesn't know what's going on. He can't defeat zone. This year, CJ Stroud is seeing the highest rate of zone of any quarterback in the NFL, 87% of his dropbacks. So he's getting zone. It's what he was great. It's what he slayed at last year. The problem is he's taking way more sacks this year. He has the most sacks taken of any quarterback against zone. He's on pace for 57 sacks against zone this year. That's more than doubling last year's rate. And he's 7th worst among quarterbacks in pressure to sack. He's killing drives, by the way, of these third down where he's just taking sacks, or in second down where, they're then turning into third and long. So that's been the biggest difference so far. This next week is against Jacksonville, who's been the exact opposite, right? Their defense has been, let's play man, different than anybody else. And you saw Monday night, if you play man against Josh Allen, you're going to get wrecked. It's not going to work. He's going to destroy you. So with Stroud, he's still kind of that QB3, QB4. We're not going to really adjust a ton of things, but it is a reality check that people saw last year and thought is just going to go up another level, when I think we're going to keep getting this. Jason, I think we looked up his consistency score of like what he's done over the last 17 games. I want to say it's like less than 40%.
CJ Stroud is a C in consistency, which for a quarterback that's exceeding 20 points in a 4-point per passing touchdown league, he has done it 41% of the time.
Okay.
And that includes the 3 games from this season, which are 0, 0, and 0 times has he passed 20 fantasy points.
Are you adjusting anything about the offense in general this year? Because it's like, Nico, we're moving forward. It's fine. I do think we still need to have a conversation with Tank Dell. I've been like closing my eyes and just hoping that it works out.
Same.
You and me both, brother.
Co-sign.
You and me both. I mean, I've gone back. I've watched the film. The opportunities, bringing in a third wide receiver is going to hurt, all but the alpha. Nico has established himself as the alpha. So you're going to have Diggs games. You're going to have Dell games. Every now and then in the right matchup, you might have all 3 hit. They are still utilizing him, pass rate, route participation, all those things. He's still very, very involved. A couple of bad plays here and there, but you can only excuse it for so long. So he's got to go out there. Dell's got to go out there and prove he is worthy of, wherever he was, the 5th, 6th round of your drafts, and that he is going to bring fantasy points. Because right now, I would say most fantasy managers are going to bench him this week. I will not. I think this matchup is one where I'm going to try to take advantage of.
You're not a coward.
I ain't no coward. But if you bench him and he has a great week, now it feels like you're chasing. And so that's where, I have an expectation that Dell ends the season with a lot of yards, a handful of touchdowns, and, 7 or 8 really, really good games. And most wide receivers are very inconsistent. When you look, we talk about this at the end of the year, every year, the truth about wide receivers, the truth about running backs, and we break down every player, how their fantasy points came, and most fantasy wide receivers are inconsistent. It's when it happens at the very beginning of the season that you feel like you cannot keep committing. I'm going to keep committing.
Yeah, I think Dell's such a good trade target right now in all formats, but especially Dynasty. So I'm with you in that aspect of let's just keep starting him. Eventually, we're going to be right, and good things are going to happen. But on Stroud,
unless he's not good enough.
That's true. On Stroud, we have to recall he did set the rookie record for YPA last year, just outlier efficient. So we probably should have factored in some regression there just naturally into that, and that's going to lead to, if that hits and that continues, that's going to lead to some down performances from the pass catchers. But as I mentioned, last week they struggled against the Vikings. Apparently Sam Darnold setting the world on fire now, but the defense struggled against the Vikings. But in general, the defense has been pretty good. And I mentioned if that continues, then you're not going to see him push as much. So it's a combination of a few things that the efficiency will have to come up, and hopefully the pass rate comes up. Otherwise, all three of these pass catchers at certain points of the year will be in trouble, as will CJ Stroud.
That's going to do it for this episode of the Footballers Dynasty podcast. If you want to make sure your lineup is in tip-top shape, I want to recommend our ultimate dashboard. I got recommended Juwan Jennings in a league for a spot start.
Nice.
Might have won me a league.
There you go.
Nice.
Yeah. And I also played against Juwan Jennings in about 3 leagues.
Got crushed.
So, yeah. Hey, it works out really well. So, yeah, you can get that ultimate dashboard if you want to be a Foot Clan member. And we will get to talk to you next week. Hopefully, we'll get some more information, figure out what's trending or ending, and we'll talk to you again soon. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. If you want to take your Dynasty skills to the next level, check out thefantasyfootballers.com.